or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Willard Evans, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the March 26th, 2026 issue of the Buffalo Criterion on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Leading off, first article is written by Ben Jealous, What Spring Hides. Spring arrives this week, and the world feels alive again. Trees fill out, birds return. The air softens, and it is the season when nature tells us life is coming back. But this spring also arrives with a number most Americans have barely heard. This winter, scientists counted just 12,260 western monarch butterflies along the California coast. In 1997, the first formal count found roughly 1.2 million. In 2022, the count was 335,479. That means the western monarch population today is about 1% of what it was a generation ago, and only about 4% of what it was 4 years ago. You do not need advanced science to understand that. You only need subtraction, and yet most Americans have heard almost nothing about it. That silence says something important about how environmentalism changed. There was a time when the country knew these stories. When bald eagles were disappearing, the news was everywhere. Environmentalists shouted it from the rooftops until the whole country knew. People rallied. Laws changed. The birds came back. When whales were being hunted toward extinction, the world knew. Environmentalists raised the alarm again. People rallied and hunting slowed. Many whale populations began to recover. For years, environmentalism asked people to protect what they loved. It was a movement built less on fear than on love, on the simple belief that some things were worth saving before they were gone. 35 years ago, 78% of Americans said they considered themselves environmentalists. Around that same time, Western monarchs still numbered in the low millions. Then the movement began speaking more and more about climate change. The science behind that shift was necessary and important, but the public language has changed too. Instead of simple subtraction, we asked people to think more and more in terms of carbon concentrations, atmospheric models, and long-range projections built from advanced physics. At the same time, we talked less about habitat loss, species decline, and the wild things people could still see disappearing. We thought we could make the conversation more complex and still hold everyone. We did not. Today, the share of Americans who identify as environmentalists has fallen to 41%. Meanwhile, the losses keep growing. Scientists say species are now disappearing at more than 100 times the normal rate. That is why many believe we are entering the early stage of a sixth mass extinction. What makes this one different from the 5 before, and it is simple. Nature caused the others. This one is being driven by us, mostly through habitat destruction, along with overuse, pollution, invasive species, and climate change. We still need to talk about climate change. It is real and urgent. But if we want to build a stronger movement, we also need to talk again in the language that has always moved people. Environmentalism first became powerful by appealing to people's love for wild things and wild places. People still care deeply about wild things. People are still moved by love and more than fear. And subtraction is still the math most people understand best. Our next article is written by Betty Jean Grant. Fighting among ourselves will not empower our beloved East Side community. Last week, this writer had the privilege of attending the grand opening of a new supermarket on the east side of Buffalo. I was invited to attend this event by members of the Bangladeshi community, many of whom I had met before I retired from the Erie County Legislature in 2017. The new supermarket deemed the largest one on Buffalo's east side, is in the Buffalo Trade Center, a huge former warehouse building at 141 Walden Avenue. Some people have criticized me for attending the grand opening or for even shopping at that supermarket. Honestly, I cannot understand why anyone would have a problem with anyone who would take their money and invest it in a part of the city that has been neglected by the business, political, and philanthropic communities of Buffalo. I am wondering how this writer's appearance at the opening of a food store in an area that, for decades, has been designated as a food desert can be seen as a negative action. Up until a few years ago, Tops Supermarket on Jefferson Avenue was the only supermarket on our side of the city. Now, with the mainly Bangla community opening a large grocery store on Bailey Avenue, two on Fillmore, and another on Walden Avenue at Bailey, the not-so-nice designation of the east side of Buffalo being a food desert should be put to rest. The warehouse where the supermarket is located has been vacant and unused for years. With new tenants and a new use for all that space, it is hoped that this building and others like it will be successful and find their way back on the city tax rolls. This could ensure the city gives itself back on its much-needed positive financial footing. We as consumers can do our part by patronizing those new as well as older businesses located in our community. That way, we can start the effort to rebuild our commercial districts by opening new businesses ourselves or by supporting others who do. The key word is support, as it relates to building up or bringing back wealth and vitality. This was evident when hard-working East Side residents walked to Jefferson Avenue, Broadway Market, and the Central Park Plaza to shop at IDS, Sattlers, Norbans, Twin Fair, and other neighborhood stores. We did not boycott those stores because they were not owned by us. We shopped at them because they were located for our convenience right in the neighborhoods where we lived. There are many more vacant buildings struggling to survive on commercial strips such as Jefferson, Broadway, Clinton, Broadway, Genesee, and East Ferry Street. Let us learn about organizing and recruiting potential owners and investors while we practice Kwanzaa's principles of unity and self-determination. As we strive to work hard to improve the quality of life for all who call the east side of Buffalo home, let us remember what Baba Kamau R.E. Fields always reminds us: working together works. Next up is an article written by Norman Franklin, Exceptional Service, Conditional Belonging, the Pattern Beneath American Exceptionalism. Patterns say something about us. Sustained patterns over centuries reveal what beliefs undergird our identity. The pattern says, "This is us. This is our national identity." As we approach the 250-year celebration of exceptionalism, how patriotism is rewarded speaks volumes about the nation's unfinished promise. There is a quiet undertow flowing through the Department of Defense. Military contributions are scrubbed. Heroic acts during battle are given a dismissive nod. NPR reported in 2025 that Arlington National Cemetery has removed historical sections about African Americans, Hispanics, and females from its website. General Colin Powell and the Tuskegee Airmen have been scrubbed from military sites. Thanks for your service. The pattern is from the same playbook. The call for service, serve valiantly despite contradictions, racial hierarchy is status quo. Discharged and moved to the margins of society. From World War I to Vietnam, the tension between service and full citizenship has tacitly become thanks for serving. A soldier doesn't complain. Some veterans serve to fight. Others must first fight to serve. They fight on two fronts: acceptance within the ranks and the enemy on the battlefields. The Harlem Hellfighters spent 191 days under fire. It was World War I. Jim Crow was in its heyday in America. They fought racist policies that would deny them wearing the uniform. The white officers refused to command the all-black 369th Infantry Regiment. The unit was placed under French command. They were among the first American infantry soldiers to arrive in France. They were soldiers. They were fighting men. They gave them pickaxes and shovels, a slap in the face for an infantry regiment. Here's another slight on the dignity of the black soldiers. The French needed reinforcements. General John Pershing, commander of the American Expeditionary Forces, the AEF, gave the African American soldiers to France. His orders were to maintain the independence and identity of the American forces. AEF headquarters sent a letter to the French forces. The letter advised the French not to eat with the black soldiers or shake their hands, and do not praise their heroics. The AEF was concerned that these acts of acceptance, dignity, and equality would inspire aspirations in African Americans which would be intolerable to whites. Henry Johnson, Lawrence McVeigh, and 169 other members of the 369th were honored with France's Croix de Guerre, the nation's highest military award. The Tuskegee Airmen had to prove themselves worthy of a chance to fight for America. They had to prove themselves in battle. They fought racist ideas on the air bases, in the local pubs, and they fought the Germans in the air. The Red Tails, the name given the Tuskegee Squadron, escorted bombers to their targets and their return to the base. Their skills gained the confidence of the bomber crews. That led bomber crews to request Red Tail escorts. The African American has proven to be fierce in battle, ready to serve, patriotism unquestioned. During the Vietnam era, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara faced a manpower shortage. In the 1960s, enlistments were declining. McNamara's 100,000 would boost enlistments and provide African Americans an opportunity to show their patriotism and make their families and communities proud of their contributions. The armed forces needed 100,000 new recruits every year. McNamara's plan lowered the enlistment standards. The program was framed as a social upliftment initiative. The military could train disadvantaged men, they would gain skills and give opportunities to the poor. Enlistments under these lowered standards were labeled New Standards Men. The recruits had low literacy levels, lacked educational opportunities, and had minimal preparation for military technical training. Among officers and troops, among some black communities, the recruits were mockingly labeled McNamara's morons. The program disproportionately drew recruits from poor and African American communities. Project 100,000 troops suffered higher casualty rates. Many lacked the training for specialized assignments and ultimately served in the infantry. After the war, they suffered higher unemployment rates and low-wage job opportunities. The promised social mobility never materialized. The pattern, conditional belonging. The African American answers the call to defend democracy. What was accepted as an invitation to full belonging has repeatedly been only a convenience in moments when the nation needed bodies more than it needed justice. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo Criterion on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Moving on now, our next article is written by Baba Amwale Eng. Shackled and enslaved but never broken. The power of values and ideals has been kept from our consciousness and that of our children through miseducation, misdirection, manipulation, and deception. I believe that this is done to make us believe that power can only be achieved through acquiescence, bowing down, or at a minimum, going along to get along with the status quo, at the expense of the people with the hope for a few crumbs from the tables of corruption that abound in this society that you are required to close your eyes to. Well, in this day and time, dangerous and wondrous as it is, that kind of thinking doesn't work anymore. The proverbial wool that covered our eyes has been lifted, and the illusions have been shattered with the blood of martyrs and the dashed hopes of mothers who birth in hope yet grieve in anguish for the lives lost to false promises and reckless hope. A young brother, Ibrahim Traore, has echoed the reality of Africans throughout the diaspora, that we have been shackled and enslaved, but we have never been and are not broken, as we rise like phoenixes all over the earth, with the spirit of liberation and resistance pulsing through our veins, as we fight back against the institutions and people who would keep us in fear, caught up in our own anger and immobilized. Yes, that spirit of liberation is present and pervasive throughout the world, from our mother/fatherland through the Caribbean and the Middle East and America. The people are rising, and the spirit that says our values from our ancient Africa that uphold truth, establish order, work for balance and harmony, stand up for propriety, demand reciprocity and justice will be ever present in our lives. These are the truths that are self-evident to us and are dearer to us than fear. We are learning to channel our anger in ways that lead to resolution because unity and self-determination matter to us. Because we know that collective work and responsibility lead to collective success, and cooperative economics makes us all have what we need. And we know this because we have adopted this purpose and have the faith that we will achieve it. My people, as long as we embrace values that come from our culture and uphold and hold each other to the principles that allowed our ancestors to achieve and build the greatest civilizations to ever exist, like most recently Mali and Songhai and Ghana, the reality of oppression and the possibilities of enslavement, more Jim Crow, and generational trauma will no longer be a legacy that holds us down, but will be a milestone that we count as our collective achievement. We have been committed to overcoming all odds and moving on. Now we will commit to overcoming those same and even greater odds and bringing it home to our families and communities. We will reframe all the oppressive narratives that have kept us locked in fear and self-hatred. I know this seems to ignore the reality of generational, historical, and complex traumas that have been transmitted through our DNA and compounded by our daily experiences. That is a reality that we have been living with and overcoming for generations by struggling and staying engaged. Now our scholars, scientists, and Black psychologists have developed healing techniques that allow us to come together and release those traumas in collective examination and discussion in safe places created by us and for us. Please, family, walk with us as we continue to overcome the racial and cultural dimensions of racial injustice. We need your help in continuing to redirect our righteous anger toward liberating activities and organizing our community to fight back and build the institutions that we need to respond effectively to the police brutality and systemic injustices that we know still prevail and are active in the society, despite the increased number of conscious and committed Black police and other officials who come from and are committed to securing and uplifting our communities. They can't do it by themselves, and neither can we. We need each other, all of us standing with and for each other, seen and unseen. Help us overcome the trajectory of mass incarceration, no matter where the pipeline starts, whether it is school to prison or home to prison. We can redirect that trajectory through meaningful education programming and after-school programs. I am not saying anything new. I am only saying that it takes all of us and all of our collective thinkings to flesh it out and come out with solutions that can be tested and work. My people, Black folk, I know, this may seem so far out of our reach, like we have gone past the point of no return, but that is not true. We only might think that because they have controlled our thinking for so long, and we have actually in some cases given that up to them to let them think for us, because thinking about this reality can be so painful. But people, please now know that we can stop it. Remember, Malik el-Haji Shabazz taught us that we are our own liberators. We can organize to overcome the voter suppression that is coming at us right now and all the other systemic inequalities in education, employment, and housing, etc., that are thrown at us. It takes us beginning the hard conversations. We can do this. Just think. Our mourning over loss and harm is good, but when our ancestors got their freedom, no one sat them down for group counseling or therapy. They had to keep it moving and do what they needed to do to live, build, and leave a future for us, a legacy of liberation, not a comfortable inheritance of allowing life to dictate how our living will be. Our legacy gave us dignity and the sovereignty of choice that is only preserved through hard work, the same way our ancestors did it. While American and European institutions continue to promote an ideology of oppression and exploitation, it is up to us to maintain our freedoms, increase our sovereignty, and demand the dignity of our collective humanity. We are only going to do that through struggle. We know that getting woke and staying woke requires work and study. If we can reach the point where we believe that we can break the chains of mass incarceration, the abuse of our women and children, the suppression of our vote, and the denial of our human right to liberty and justice, then we can achieve our liberation in this lifetime. When we can defy the lies of white superiority on every level of consciousness and embrace the truth of black excellence and the ability to achieve on every level of our being, then we will truly be free and know what it means to enjoy our full humanity. And this was written by yours servant, Baba Amawale Eng. Moving on now, our next article carries the headline, Black America's 2026 Urban Challenges, Mayor Mamdani Case Study. This is written by Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis, Jr., and here underneath the headline is a slight, I would call it a insert. NNPA Newswire, we are the Black Press of America. For the past 199 years, since the first publication of Freedom's Journal in New York City in 1827, we have had to call out those who pretended to be our political allies. Accountability from those we help to elect is a fair and just demand. And now on to our article. Today, across the United States of America, in some of the largest urban cities, Black Americans have been renewed nightmares about being taken for granted, ignored, and being erased in history and in the public square. Ethnic cleansing is an insidious form of systematic racism. In response to the increasing browning of America, concerns are raised about the unfulfillment of prior commitments intended to ensure racial equality in municipal politics, economics, and urban revitalization. New York City is the nation's largest city. The presence and contributions of African Americans to the city's centuries-long development and evolution are rarely highlighted or saluted. The election of Zohran Mamdani would not have been possible without the huge turnout of African American and Latino voters. Yet the interests of Black America in the nation's largest metropolis appear to be triaged routinely by the Mamdani administration. We are the Black Press of America. For the past 199 years, since the first publication of Freedom's Journal in New York City in 1827, we have had to call out those who pretended to be our political allies. Accountability by those we help to elect is a fair and just demand. Voters of color, both Black and Latino New Yorkers, backed Andrew Cuomo heavily in the primary, but then ultimately decided to give Zohran Mamdani a chance, overcoming their skepticism on housing, transit, and public safety, and reportedly moved by his affordability agenda. This trust, on the part of Black voters in particular, may have been misplaced. Why? Several troubling early signs that the new mayor is disregarding New Yorkers of color and treating them like Ralph Ellison's iconic Invisible Man. Thus far, Mayor Mamdani has appointed no black deputy mayors. This is a glaring signal to black voters who voted for Mamdani on the promise of racial equity in the city's administration. Does Mamdani value our insights, lived experiences, or our voices in crafting critical policies in City Hall? Mamdani was forced to apologize to black New Yorkers for overlooking the historical contributions of enslaved and indigenous people to building the city when he talked about a city built by immigrants in his inauguration speech. The Mamdani administration is holding a series of rental ripoff hearings, spearheaded by Sia Weaver, the director of his Office to Protect Tenants, who called home ownership a form of white supremacy. The mayor is reaching out to help private landlords rather than prioritizing fixing public housing, NYCHA, which has a dismal track record for poor conditions, no heat, years plus waits for repair, rampant pests, and mold. 90% of the more than 511,000 NYCHA residents are black and Latino, which is part of a larger trend in which 95% of black households in New York State live in highly segregated buildings and/or neighborhoods. NYCHA is the largest landlord in New York City, so the Mamdani administration telling residents to wait even longer for a solution to their long-standing substandard living conditions has to be challenged. The unfolding case study of Mayor Mamdani in New York City reveals that we must keep voting with record voter turnout. But after the elections, we must hold mayors and other elected officials accountable. Mamdani still has time to ensure greater equity in New York City. But will he do the right thing at the right time? Moving on now, our next article is written by Louis J. King II, President and CEO, OIC of America. The future of work. The future of work is no longer a distant idea. It's here. Automation, artificial intelligence, remote work, and the green economy are redefining the workforce and at breakneck speed. For the communities we serve and partner with, this moment presents both a challenge and a huge opportunity. The question is, will we be passengers or drivers of this transformation? At OIC of America, we're preparing people to lead in this new world of work and not get left behind. That means teaching digital and AI skills, expanding access to technology, and making sure every learner has the tools to succeed in a tech-enabled economy. But it also means investing in emotional intelligence, critical thinking, and adaptability, skills that are just as important in a fast-changing and increasingly competitive world. The World Economic Forum predicts that by 2030, up to 85 million jobs may be displaced by automation, but 97 million new roles will emerge. These new jobs will require new skill sets. The future will reward lifelong learners, those who are willing to train, pivot, and grow. And for the skilled trades, where we focus on preparing people for the workforce, the possibilities to chart new paths are endless. In Pennsylvania, our Delaware Valley Alliance, or DVA, serves as the blueprint for this evolution. The DVA is an essential component of the infrastructure needed to ensure communities secure the necessary resources to thrive long-term. By integrating housing, public safety, career training, health, and more into a cohesive advocacy framework, we aren't just filling jobs. We are securing economic independence for Pennsylvania's talented, yet untapped and overlooked, workers. This coordinated effort is structured so that the Commonwealth's booming industry surges in life sciences, data centers, and advanced manufacturing also benefit its citizens more equitably. These wins reflect a statewide victory for its citizens. As the future of work arrives, no community is left on the sidelines of progress. We look forward to scaling this approach in other communities where we serve. for communities that have historically been left out of opportunity and forgotten. The future of work must include justice, not just jobs. That means policy change, corporate investment, and community-based solutions that put people at the center. This is a defining moment. Let's make sure our people are prepared to not just survive, but lead. For more information, visit www.oicofamerica.org. Betty Jean Grant writes our next article, Racism is Alive and Thriving in Western New York. I am guessing that some of you are saying, well, there she goes again, always talking about racism. Now, I guess those people in our city of good neighbors who say that are probably correct. I do talk a lot about the racism in Buffalo and the surrounding areas, because a lot of racist people are being blatantly racist in comments they post in the comment section of the local daily newspaper or on the local television and radio stations around the area. These homegrown haters and race baiters generally go on a venom-filled tirade in their comments when they go and hide behind their computer screens as they spew anti-black sentiments, regardless of whether the news report is favorable or not to the person or victim being discussed or demonized. Take the situation that happened when a negative post or photo was circulated on the POTUS social media page depicting former President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama as apes. At first, President number 47 claimed that he knew nothing about the post, insisting that a randomly nameless White House staffer posted a video without his knowledge that showed many of the nation's Democratic political leaders as caricatures from the movie The Lion King. Someone mentioned that was false information, as there were no apes in the movie. Whether there were apes or not is not the issue. The issue is that someone in that Republican White House chose to portray one of our greatest presidents and his wife, of all the animals in the movies, as apes. I have nothing against the primates, except for the fact that racist segregationists and white supremacists have used animals such as apes, gorillas, raccoons, and monkeys to denigrate Africans and African Americans for as long as we have been in this country. That is one of the reasons why I was so dismayed to see in the local media's story about the Buffalo police officer arrested for killing his wife, someone's comment and a photo of the city of Buffalo's D District Police captain. The female officer, whose hair was in a neatly braided bun, was being depicted as a grossly overweight female gorilla wearing hair braids. Let me make myself clear. I am not passing judgment on that particular case in question. Those are the roles of the police, the DA, and a judge and jury. What I am saying is that no one should be dehumanized by being thought of as an ape or any of the other primates or animals chosen by evil, racist people who cling to their mistaken belief that white skin denotes racial superiority. And we have another article written by Betty Jean Grant, Church and a Movie, a Black History Weekend with Mayor Ryan. Buffalo's newly elected mayor, Mr. Sean Ryan, has pulled off a very successful and productive initiative in getting to know his constituents on a more personal level, especially those city residents he did not represent when he was served in the 61st New York State Senate District seat. Mayor Ryan and his staff invite some of his supporters to attend the February 15th church service at the Michigan Street Baptist Church in the African American Heritage Corridor on Michigan Avenue. No, I did not type a typo. The church was named Michigan Street Baptist Church, according to an original plaque that was found and later restored to the church a few decades ago. The pastor and some members of the Humboldt Parkway Baptist Church were the hosts for this particular Sunday service. This writer was surprised to learn that the founding members of the Humboldt Parkway Baptist Church moved from the Michigan Avenue Baptist Church and into the then Humboldt Parkway Lutheran Church in the late 1950s. One of the highlights of that last Sunday's visit was when one of the church members gave a detailed history of the significance of what is known in the African culture as Watch Night. Watch Night is when enslaved Africans in states that had seceded from the Union during the Civil War gathered in their cabins or in the woods to wait for and to celebrate the official end of slavery. That was when the Emancipation Proclamation, signed on September 14, 1862, and became the law of the land in those slave-holding states on January 1, 1863. Those old traditional watch night celebrations are still observed today in churches and communities across this country when folks go to church or to parties on New Year's Eve. Fact is, the first celebration to commemorate the New Year was in 1904 in New York City. The first ball drop did not happen in Times Square until 1907. Many researchers are crediting the Emancipation Proclamation's night watches as being the model for this country used to celebrate the New Year. People should not be shocked or surprised because the United States commemoration of Memorial Day to honor the dearly departed ones was first practiced by this country's formerly enslaved citizens. The trip to the North Park movie theater was indeed a treat. The movie shown was Shirley, and it was a historical account of the political campaign of the late Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm in her bid to become the first female president of the United States of America. The movie was entertaining as well as informative. I have always known that Ms. Chisholm was not supported by many of her black political associates. However, a few things I learned after watching the movie. 1. Arthur Hardwick was her second husband. 2. She was supported by the Black Panther Party. 3. She visited George Wallace, the then Alabama governor and presidential candidate, in the hospital after a failed assassination attempt on his life. The theater was almost filled to capacity, and the audience was a diverse group of folks who seemed to, by their applause, thoroughly enjoy the movie. The free bags of popcorn supplied by our honorable mayor were appreciated as well. Norman Franklin returns with an article entitled "The Rhythm and Reason of Our Times." We hear the noise. It's loud. History rhymes. Weaponized fears, concentrated wealth, managed scarcity, the disciplining of the marginalized, echoes of unresolved tensions. The unresolved tensions are centuries old. Their subcutaneous residence appeases a society that is uncomfortable with responsibility because reckoning demands it. America would rather scrub its history. Rather than celebrate grit and resilience, it removes the evidence of racial violence, social oppression, and political complicity in structuring a system of injustice. These 250 years of democracy have convulsed with atrocities against humanity. We cannot present this experiment as only American exceptionalism. The premise, a model for the world, successful democratic governance pursuing equality and justice within the democratic diversity. Those who would replicate the model may be unprepared to manage the fault lines of tension. The question becomes, does America want to share the wisdom of the experience, the shared sacrifices of the oppressed, and the lessons learned by the oppressors? Will they show the healing power of truth or the face of dominance that rewrites, reshapes, and renames? Chattel slavery becomes social engineering. Jim Crow becomes law and order, and concentrated wealth becomes divine order. These are questions that echo loudly in the policies of the Trump administration. They are heard in the protests in urban and small-town America. History rhymes. History rehearses. Resistance takes to the streets. Legislative moves engineered by claims of election fraud, will restrict access to the polls. It doesn't signal a learned lesson, but retrenchment. Poll tax and literacy tests that once selectively restricted access to the polls becomes limited early voting and fewer polling places, challenges to the credibility of mail-in ballots, and driver's license required to validate the right to vote. The decision to dismantle the Department of Education invokes ominous memories of separate but unequal schools. The return policy and decision-making to state autonomy removes federal oversight. State legislators have shown their ideological alignment with the Trump administration policies. The eagerness to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, programs is the fault line of racial tension, a zero-sum mentality. Swift enactment of legislation to penalize DEI's mention in programs and contract narratives signals a tectonic shift away from reckoning with past systemic inequities. The direction of the country reflects less of a desire to implement the lessons and wisdom of our struggles to be a nation of equal justice, and more of a desire to reintroduce shelved policies proven to be antithetical to our one nation creed. There is a housing crisis in America. Policy decisions, couched in the recommendations of Project 2025, restrict access to affordable housing and exponentially increase the number of the unsheltered. Access to decent, affordable housing was one of the core findings of the 1968 Kerner Commission report. In the decades that followed its release, bipartisan efforts to reckon with the inequity was government policy. Under the current administration, partisanship is a casualty of government efficiency. The affordable housing crisis is a problem manufactured by liberal Democrats. History rhymes in politics with entrenched power dynamics, ideological fusions, and unresolved tensions. As we approach the 250-year celebration of our nation's founding, the myth of divine destiny threads the polishing of the optics of American exceptionalism. It undergirds the whitewashing of history, the rewriting of history narratives, and the removal of images and chattel slavery, Jim Crow lynchings, and government complicity in systemic racism. The protesters in the streets, the marchers in resistance to policies give us hope. History rehearses. Protesters take to the streets to register their feeling, to exercise their First Amendment right of free expression, their rights of dissent. National Guard troops have at times been deployed to safeguard constitutional rights, such as in Montgomery and Birmingham, and at other times to suppress demonstrations. Masked ICE agents resemble occupation forces dispatched by an administration deaf to dissent. A major flashpoint is immigration, an echo of the civil rights era. The immigrant is ostracized, devalued, demoralized, and denigrated with derogatory labels. Another lesson from our experience missed, another misrepresentation. But we will have a polished America to celebrate the 250-year commemoration. Once we clear our throats and sweep away the confetti, my hope is that we restore the forbidden images, allow history to breathe with the flaws and grandeur of the American experiment. It's not perfect. It's a work in progress. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo Criterion on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our next article is written by Rayshawn Ellis, Boxing's New Era, Who Rules the Pound-for-Pound Rankings in 2026? And he has a list of the top 10 pound-for-pound fighters. Number 1, Alexander Usyk. Number 2, Naoya Inoue. Number 3, Jesse Rodriguez. 4, Dmitry Bivol. 5, Artur Beterbiev. 6, David Benavidez. 7, Devin Haney. 8, Shakur Stevenson. 9, Saul Canelo Alvarez. And number 10, Jaron Ennis. The post-Crawford era. Who will take the throne? With the retirement of pound-for-pound king Terence Crawford on December 16, 2025, and the latest bouts following January, boxing finds itself in a transitional phase. The old guard is nearing the end of their careers, while a new generation of fighters is vying for supremacy. Alexander Usyk continues to seek fights against aging opponents like Deontay Wilder, who's 40 years old, who is far from his prime. Dmitry Bivol, 35, and Artur Beterbiev, 41, are in talks for a trilogy later this year, leaving David Benavidez without major names at light heavyweight. Canelo Alvarez, who's 35, is scheduled to fight on September 12th in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, aiming to regain momentum after his loss to Crawford. For champions under 30, this is a golden opportunity to become the face of boxing. Devin Haney, the welterweight Debo. Haney shocked the boxing world with an upset win over Brian Norman Jr., who earned Ring Magazine's Knockout of the Year in 2025. After scoring a second-round knockdown, Haney cruised to a unanimous decision, becoming a three-division world champion at age 27. Looking ahead, Haney's ideal matchup in 2026 would be against the winner of Ryan Garcia versus Mario Barrios, giving him a chance to avenge his no-contest bout with Garcia. Two fighters who could pose real challenges are Karen Chakhadzadian and Delonte Johnson, both capable of pushing Haney over 12 rounds. Karen, in particular, intrigues me. He went 24 rounds with Jaron Ennis, matching his footwork, endurance, and ring IQ. Could he replicate that against Haney? Jesse Rodriguez, chasing greatness across weight classes. Rodriguez dominated his last 5 fights, all ending in stoppages. This success has sparked talk of a jump to super bantamweight to face Naoya Inoue, a fight that would be both lucrative and historic. In smaller weight classes, big money fights are rare, making this move tempting. If Rodriguez skips an entire division, he should first take 2 fights at bantamweight before targeting Inoue in early 2027, ideally in Las Vegas. Given the recurring hand wrap controversy in Japan, fighting Inoue there may not be wise. Interim fights would help Rodriguez adjust physically to the weight jump. If bantamweight proves too much, he may reconsider the Inoue bout. Shakur Stevenson, a masterclass in technique. Stevenson delivered a flawless performance against Teofimo Lopez, showcasing elite technique, footwork, and lead hand control. He barely left first gear while shutting out a decorated champion, a testament to his technical brilliance. As a natural lightweight, Stevenson has options. Move down to fight Raymond Muratalla, or stay at super lightweight, currently the most talent-rich division in boxing. If he stays, a matchup with Gary Antoine Russell would be a fan favorite. The Boogeymen, David Benavidez and Jaron Ennis. Benavidez remains one of boxing's most avoided fighters. Canelo Alvarez has openly dismissed a fight, saying Benavidez offers 25 pounds and nothing else. The reality, Benavidez is too big, too fast, and too dangerous for a 35-year-old Canelo. Bivol and Beterbiev also seem uninterested, leaving Benavidez to target Gilberto Ramirez at cruiserweight. He stays active, but marquee fights are essential for his legacy. Meanwhile, Jaron Ennis is rumored to be set to fight Victor Ortiz on April 25th in a highly anticipated super welterweight clash. While not a title, the winner will gain American stardom and face names like Xander Zayas or the Thurman Fundora winner. Ennis cracks the top 10 based on the eye test alone. He hasn't faced elite opponents yet, but his skill set screams pound-for-pound potential. And some final thoughts. This year promises fireworks. With a mix of seasoned champions and rising stars, 2026 could redefine boxing's hierarchy. Who will seize the crown in the post-Crawford era? Patrick H. Freeman writes our next article. Open letter to Buffalo Common Council Education Committee concerning creation of a student-operated digital media group reporting on Buffalo Public School activities. I am writing you this letter to recommend that the Buffalo Public Schools incorporate digital media-based journalism program that would be run by students covering all student activities. Some of the best talents in the world come from our youth right here in the city of Buffalo, but they are no longer getting adequate coverage from traditional media outlets. It has become apparent that the best way to solve this problem in the most fiscally responsible way is to incorporate a digital media platform dedicated to covering the outstanding achievements of our youth by our students that might have an interest in becoming journalists. This program would utilize the Apollo Media Center as the hub of this citywide program, dedicated to highlighting the achievements of the students of Buffalo, New York, from sports to the arts. Students will cover themselves and learn to write about the activities that take place in the city of Buffalo. The environment of media coverage has so drastically changed that an idea like this is a no-brainer, since the sources for this program are already available. The Apollo Media Center will serve as the media production hub, training young students in how to cover sports and various other activities that are no longer receiving the publicity that they once received. This program can be citywide at the high school level, incorporating students from each school to create digital media contributions from each school. Teachers and area reporters can be utilized as advisors in assisting students with production and writing columns related to events at each school. The Apollo Media Center would become the central production hub in putting the digital media operation into action. Students would produce their own programs, reporting on activities in the city from sports, plays, and other positive functions, highlighting our young people. Students would also be responsible for maintaining media platforms with written and video content. Most of the equipment necessary to create this entity already is here, along with the fact that the cell phone gives any individual the ability to broadcast and report a story instantly. This is sent to Mayor Sean Ryan, Buffalo Common Council, Buffalo Board of Education. Next up is the Is That Right? Column written by Frank Gist. Measles again and again. A controversy has emerged at Disneyland after 57 children came down with measles. The controversy erupted, asking why children were contracting measles, which had been declared eradicated in the U.S. in 2001. Some people blame the individuals who refused to vaccinate their children because of fear of side effects, as in consequences from injecting heavy metals into their children's bodies. Many of these so-called anti-vaxxers suspect the inexplicable increase in autism in children is linked to vaccines. The media and mainstream scientific community have labeled these people as crazy conspiracy theorists who have no real scientific proof of any connection between vaccines and autism. Yet, the scientific community nor the media has no clue why autism has drastically risen in this generation. As a baby boomer, I vividly remember being vaccinated in grammar school. The teachers would walk the classes up in a large room that reeked antiseptic and alcohol, where we were made to pull up our sleeves up as far as they could go. One by one, our exposed limb was swabbed down with ice-cold alcohol before being stabbed in the arm with a hypodermic needle. It hurt. I also remember having chickenpox and measles like most of the other children in my neighborhood. Chickenpox was as common as a cold then, but I don't remember anyone dying from childhood diseases. Most kids contracted chickenpox. They would be told to stay in the house a few days, and things would pass. In fact, Having chicken pox was almost part of being a child. In 1963, 4 to 5 million children contracted chicken pox, and only 500 died. But the medical community decided no child should have to suffer through childhood viruses. So, vaccines of every variety have been implemented to save society from these pestilences. Today, every child is required to receive no less than 29 different vaccinations: chickenpox, measles, mumps, whooping cough, tuberculosis, flu, pneumonia, hepatitis, A and B rubella, tetanus, and retrovirus, and many more. On its surface, this is great news for humanity, to eradicate this disease from the course of nature. However, there is a law in physics that says for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. It's common sense to recognize that injecting millions of children with heavy metals is going to have a negative effect on some of these children. Is it any wonder that autism and cancer have skyrocketed in the past 60 years? Every day of the week, I see an advertisement for prescription drugs that tout some miracle cures but have a laundry list of side effects that seem to outweigh the risk of the cure. So, why is it different with vaccinations? The dirty little secret about this most recent outbreak of measles at Disneyland is many of those children had been vaccinated against the disease. The medical community does not want the public to think the vaccines have become ineffective or has mutated to a stronger, more virulent strain that could really wreak havoc. It has been said that it is not nice to fool Mother Nature, because Mother Nature can fool us back. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the March 26, 2026 issue of the Buffalo Criterion. We read from the Buffalo Criterion every Friday at 7 p.m. Your reader has been Willard Evans. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the New York Times. At 9 o'clock, we have Buffalo Spree, and at 10 o'clock, we have episode number 15 of The Secret of Secrets by Dan Brown. Stay with us for these readings and more. Radio Reading mails out a large print program schedule to our listeners every other month. If you have not received a Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service large print program schedule in the mail, please call us at 716-821-5555. We will make sure that you receive one every other month. A Braille version of the schedule is also available upon request. Our number again is 716-821-5555.
Hello, this is Chris Wilhelm, and for the next hour,